Can't explain, but I wanna try. There's this image of you and I, and it goes dancing by in the morning and the night time. There's all these secrets that I can't keep. In my heart there's that hotel suite, and you lived there so long. It's kinda strange now you're gone. Not sure if I should show you what I found. Has it gone for good, or is it coming back around? Isn't it hard to make up your mind when you're losing and your fuse is fireside? It's all those places we used to go, and I suspect you already know that place on memory lane you like still looks the same, but something about it's changed. Not sure if I should show you what I found. Has it gone for good, or is it coming back around? Isn't it hard to make up your mind when you're losing and your fuse is fireside? And I thought I was yours forever, but maybe I was mistaken. But I just can't manage to make it through the day without thinking of you lately. In my eyes, indisposed, in disguises no one knows. Hides the face, lies the snake, in the sun in my disgrace. Boiling heat, summer stench, neath the black the sky looks clear. Call my name through the cream, and out you scream again. Black old sun, won't you come? Wash away the rain. Black old sun, won't you come? Won't you go? Stuttering, golden down, still the wallow tired frail. Times are gone for honest men, sometimes far too long for snakes. In my shoes, walk and sleep. In my youth I prayed to keep heaven sent away, and no one sings like you anymore. Like our sun, won't you come? Wash away the rain. Like our sun, won't you come? Won't you come? Like our sun, won't you come? Wash away the rain. Black outside, won't you come? Won't you come? Won't you come? Hang my head, drown my fear, till you all just disappear. Like a sun, won't you come? Wash away the rain. Black outside, won't you go? Like a sun, won't you come? Wash away the rain. Won't you go? Won't like a sun. Hello and welcome everybody to the 6 Pixels Under podcast. I'm Minas, your host. I'm like looking at the wrong place. My camera's right here. And yeah, I just wanted to do a little stream to talk about Destiny and how people felt about the video. And also like whatever questions you guys have, and any interesting topics that come up, we'll cover those too, of course. We keep it pretty off the cuff here, as a contrast to the Death of a Game series, which is like very timeline. All right, so let's just start. Apparently Dune Awakening is entering its beta pretty soon. So that's some online RPG / like virtual world news. GTA 6 was delayed to next year, but looks like visually incredible. That will most likely mimic the GTA Online approach as well. If not, go up on it. Yeah, I did actually see that Horatio cheetah. Texas, for those that don't know, I covered Friday the 13th, the game already. And on that video, people were like, you should keep an eye out for Texas Chainsaw Massacre because maybe the same thing will happen. And yeah, it just got recently announced as of like yesterday or day before that they're canceling support on it. So have I tried Mycopunk? Look it up. Mycopunk. A squad of odd robots with unique gadgets rid the galaxy of a deadly fungal menace in this highly customizable mission-based co-op shooter. Let me make sure my mic volume's high enough. In my eyes, indisposed, in disguises no one knows. Oh, I like the graphics. It kind of looks like Borderlands mixed with like .hack. Oh yeah, those wanting to know what I'm looking at. Looks aight. Complete the mission. I think what's cool about like the current age of games is like for a while we got very obsessed with graphics, and don't get me wrong, people are always going to be obsessed with them. They're always like they have a positive relationship with technology. But I guess what I'm trying to say is it's like of late we've seen like this big rise of these very team centric, cooperative centric shooters and RPGs. Online ones especially. You know, it's kind of created this slight revolution where we're almost reminded that graphics don't matter as much again. And what really matters is it looks like Marathon. Why did Marathon choose that art style? Like, I'm just gonna be very blunt. I'm a fan of art styles like that. I mean, I like indigenous colors, like for example, like Mexica coloring and Mayan coloring are just look awesome to me. So I like that kind of like high contrast coloring. The problem is that Marathon, it doesn't evoke that for me. And as a sci-fi game, I don't understand why it looks like that. You know what I mean? So it just constantly like fucks with my brain. So I also just think that Bungie can only apparently make sci-fi games, which is weird. Um, but anyway, I guess we can use that as a segue to talk about Destiny. Nice one, Hurry Shoot. Um, so with the Destiny video, people were saying, brace yourself, there's going to be a bunch of crazy fans. And first off, like, thanks for the support. No, but seriously, to those that actually watched the video and participated in the discussions, thanks for the actual support. My normal thanks for the support line is mostly tongue-in-cheek, but I haven't really felt like a super negative thing. The Destiny fan base does feel like, in the little interactions that I've had with them, a little delusional and kind of like abused, but nothing like particularly bad. Maybe more than like some of the videos I've done, but like there's plenty of videos I've done, even just in the past couple of months, that evoked a lot more like strong emotions in people. So yeah, like I don't know, maybe the fan base is just brigading me on other platforms or something, but like I haven't really got the whole like Destiny's crazy vibe yet. Like the fan bases. But so kind of going forward, like I just want to put a bow on the video for those that have seen it. Really like growing up I had this like certain like fervor and love for Bungie. Like I'm sure many of you did. Halo 1 was one of my favorite and still is my favorite single player like shooter. And Halo 2 was my favorite game. Favorite shooter as well. So like for me, these games really shaped how I approached video gaming forever. And what I mean is like H1, as you know, we call it, was very much about the physics. And Halo, I would argue, has always been about the physics. This is something I talked about in my Halo Infinite video that not even any of the Halo stands tried to argue against, because you just can't. Which is that, like, the core of what Halo always has been, with Bungie, you know, creating it, has been physics. It's been a game about its physics in so many instances. Even in the campaign, they show off the physics. You have banshees doing fucking circles around you. You have, you know, you can shoot fuel rod cannons from across the map, see them explode. Rockets, same thing. Ride warthogs off of bridges, like on the snow map. There's so many crazy things you can do in that game with the physics and replaying the different levels that it just made me fall in love with that style of play. So I've always been really into like physics-based games. And games that are very gameplay-y, which also makes me a Nintendo fan, to be honest. Not that I wasn't already a Nintendo fan as well growing up, but just saying, like, Nintendo generally focuses on kind of like mechanics in your gameplay and movement a lot. Anyway, so with Halo 2, as many people know, the game was very glitchable and buggable. And that's what I spent most of my time doing growing up. And that actually helped me be a QA tester, be a consultant, and also just have like a, as I like to joke, but it's also true, an autistic level of understanding of how to break games. And I pride myself in that. And something I usually tell clients whenever they give me their games to test is like, just so you know, I'm probably going to be able to break this in some sort of way. Just so like they're well aware. And of course, I've told the story before, but like New World's criminal system, which got redone, and well, I should just say Band-Aid, fix, replaced. They didn't even fix it. I would argue stemmed largely from my creation. As people know the story, in the alpha, I was PKing everybody and exploiting the criminal system in New World because it was very easy to exploit. Because I figured out how to exploit a system like that when I was like 10. So, needless to say, I just tried the same thing that I used to do, and it worked. And yeah, so that kind of like the Halo series really like formulated my backbone. In many ways, of shooters, of movement, you name it. And now that I got that long part of the story out of the way, after H3 with Reach, I didn't like Reach. I know many people do. I didn't. It felt like them selling out to make a COD game to me. And ironically, I think they doubled down on that concept shortly after, and also admitted it with Halo 4 behind the scenes dev stuff. Anyway, as many people know, Bungie was in a deal with Microsoft. Now, how this deal was always, described was like Bungie was like the small nerds in Seattle, and Microsoft just happened to be there, right next to them. And they were like, all right, let's do a deal. We'll make games on the PC, Xbox platform, and the Xbox, which they did, including for the games for Vista. Now, the way this story is told is that like Microsoft like robbed Bungie of Halo's IP, but like in reality, there's no world in which there's not a contract that would have stated that they would have lost their IP. So my guess is that Bungie had to, if I'm being the most like charitable to Bungie, they probably had deliverables that they had to beat in order to not lose their IP. And since they didn't reach them or didn't like do certain things, they lost their IP. Now, the less charitable take is that they were always going to lose their IP as soon as that deal ended. And they kind of were just not so prepared for that. To be fair, even though Bungie was big at the time, they weren't really big as we know them today. Now, how the story was often told after was that, oh, Microsoft was always just like on Bungie's ass. But the thing is that Halo 2's development was in development hell. If Microsoft wasn't on Bungie's ass for it, would it ever have even came out? And Bungie was also And Microsoft was also overseeing H1. So there was pretty much never a Halo project early on, which Microsoft wasn't like directly putting their hands into. And usually what that shows me is, yet you can look at it from the angle of like Microsoft are the evil overlords. Or in reality, even though I can shit on corporations a lot, it's more likely that you're not doing whatever they think that you should be doing, or you're not doing it in the way that they find it the most, successful. Now, there could be some wrongness in that because of their lack of understanding and education. Remember, Microsoft was a software company, but they weren't really heavily involved in video games in the early 2000s as much as they are now. And more, like with Destiny. So, let's talk about Destiny. Something that I didn't outright say in my video, but the timeline of events basically paints it this way. Someone actually pointed this out in the comments, so shout out to that guy. So Bungie actually had been working on the Tiger engine, and thus the beginnings of Destiny, since H2. So the reason that H2 wasn't being like developed very effectively was because like there were a bunch of different teams working on different projects at the time. One of those being Jason Jones working on another project. After he swapped over and started to work on H2, they started to kind of get things done. And they had to cut a bunch of the stuff that was in the game. And obviously, most of you already know that story with the whole levels that were shown at E3 that weren't even included in the game in many cases. But anyway, one of those demos got actually leaked. So you can actually go play that and see what was in like the original game. But so Bungie had always been wanting to pivot to something else after they lost the IP for Halo. Let's just be honest, right? They were forced to make a sequel, even though they didn't want to or didn't want to yet. And I think they always resented Microsoft for that. So there's a resentment there. But it's like not really like based necessarily on them being these like evil overlords. So after Bungie departs Microsoft, they then, start to float around and think, okay, who are we going to get involved with? The reason they choose to get involved with Activision Blizzard, even though most people think that that was super stupid, and it was, ironically, according to some executives after the fact, was that AB wasn't going to make them give up their IP. But they were going to make them go on a 10-year plan to have to monetize the game, which many of you know that the Bungie devs would end up rerouting into a sequel and then end up kind of like shipping many of the expansions with the sequel as well. So there's a couple of actions that happen throughout the story that really start to show you that like this isn't the Bungie of the old. Obviously, many of the old characters start to depart the company, but more so than that, you have this like disrespect given to the community. And the sad thing is because Destiny was able to reach such high successes, it kind of doesn't matter that they don't care about the community as much. And I'm just being honest, like, that's the biggest thing I've noticed observing the Destiny community for a while, is that, as I stated in my Destiny video, they never had a good value proposition. Their game was always kind of like, hey, this isn't, like, very fair compared to most MMORPG approaches, or even just, like, Final Fantasy XIV. Where you're paying a sub fee, you buy the expansion, you get your content. But in Destiny, you were having to spend like $200, $250 to play the game. Remember, especially because these expansions were sequential, and there wasn't any discounts on the previous ones after the new ones would come out. So, needless to say, it was treated like it was an MMORPG, but it had like a third of the content. That's kind of the genius. I think you guys are in chat are probably picking up on this. But the genius was that, like, because a big swath of audience and players haven't been exposed to MMOs and MMORPGs and online RPGs yet, Destiny was almost their first exposure. And since it's a shooter that focuses a lot on its like mechanics and gunplay, it's easy to kind of like bring players in for those reasons versus just like the online reasons. So what I'm trying to say is that like my Destiny video is from the perspective of like, hey, this is how like virtual world players saw Destiny. They saw it kind of as like a failure, which it was critically as well, the first game. That being said, I don't think we were the target audience in the end. Maybe for Statton's version of the game and previous versions of the game. But the game that came out was a lot more level based, as they talked about in some of the leaks. And I think in the end, the game was almost like this WoW, combined with Borderlands thing. One second. That could be true. Some dogs are cops. Some dogs are cops. Well, hey, Panimal, you like the art style. I don't. I think it looks weird. Oh, shit. My beat. The reason I keep looking over here, by the way, is because my other monitor is over there. It's kind of hard for me to set the frame. But I don't think you guys have big expectations of me anyway, so not with cameras. So we're good. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm trying to say, some dogs. And like a point that someone else made in the comments with me, because they were coming at it from a business perspective, is that like as much as we consider like, hey, even if you think that Destiny was a bit of overrated, like it's still pretty like successful in many ways. And thus Bungie has created a lot of success. The thing is though, is that like Bungie's never actually made for a good business partner. And I think that that seems like mean to say, but it's like if you actually look at their relationships, as far as I understand it, they've never even successfully completed a deal with another publisher yet. So it's kind of like you can look at them like, oh, they're just misunderstood, or oh, corporations just take advantage of them because they had big ideas and shit. It's like, I think they kind of get themselves into big situations and then kind of like don't deliver or don't have good relationships with the people that they get involved with, and then kind of like a teenager get mad about it and then just like, I'm gonna go to Sony now. Like that's literally what they did. It's like Microsoft, I'm gonna go to Sony now. Thanks, Jonas. I appreciate it. Obrigado. What's up, Madness? All right, so I have some topics I found in the background, and I wanted to tackle some of them. So I think they're kind of interesting mind experiments. Okay, here we go. So there's a massively. Oh, we got something in the chat. Let's see. What's up, Dirty South? I'll talk to a friend about DT onboarding for new players is impossible. Yeah, like the D2 players are a lot more angrier than the D1 players, because the D1 players in many cases, like, they had 8 years to be angry. You know, like, that's probably subsided. And they also kind of forced them to jump into the next game anyway. And I think that actually, I wish I had hard data on this, but like, from what I could see sales wise, it seems like there was a drop off from D1 to D2 in some ways. Like, I'm not exactly sure how, but my guess is that there was an exodus of players after D1 went to D2, where they weren't happy with things because essentially nothing that they did mattered anymore, right? That kind of thing. All right, so there was a massively thread that I wanted to cover by Bree Royce, which talks about how much of your MMO playtime do you actually spend interacting with other players. And I actually wanted to deep dive on this for a second, because I think misunderstandings and incorrect framings of this is kind of why virtual worlds are in the state that they are today. So let's talk about this. As many people know, and as some people might try to, I guess I would say, strawman my argument into being like, oh, well, NS only likes like massive games and PvP games. In reality, like, virtual worlds should be the most like expansive, and not in terms of size, but in terms of like potential, in terms of what's possible. Virtual worlds should be the pinnacle of everything you can have. I mean, look at RPGs today. RPGs didn't always copy mechanics from MMORPGs, and yet today they do. Shooters didn't always copy Destiny aspects from MMORPGs, and yet today they do. And so, what used to be a genre about being first and being ahead of the curve, but never truly ahead of the curve because we were always behind in gameplay and graphics, we've kind of now become a genre where it's about doing good enough. And as long as you do good enough with a very large IP, you'll likely have a big swath of a few 100,000 players who will loyally play and defend your game regardless of its faults. Like, I was reading the MMORPG subreddit. I don't recommend doing that, by the way. I do it for the lulz sometimes. It's just because, like, MMORPG discussions are generally not very good, and that's not me, like, virtue signaling or whatever, especially about my community. The reason that my community has better discussions than many other communities, you know, obviously other communities like Josh Strife Hayes are going to have some good discussions too, because they're pretty broad in terms of what kinds of players are interacting with these, you know, communities. The point that I'm trying to make is that MMO and virtual world creators like us have pretty broad and diverse audiences, but even then we still have like specific audiences. For example, I think you could just look at numbers, but just even talking generally, like Josh Strife Hayes has a lot broader appeal and approach in his content for virtual worlds. And that for me is great, because just like Lazy Peon, I need other people in the content space who are focused on other things, right? And not just because I want to be special, but because I never made my channel nor content in the virtual world space to appeal to everybody. I've always wanted to make content that, I mean, really is for like the people who really have a love for the industry. And yeah, of course, I'm going to bring in casuals. Sometimes I get comments every day of someone saying, I don't even play these games, but I like watching these videos, which to me is like one of the biggest compliments. But seriously, I think that what people hopefully in chat realize is that my content is for people that want to dig a little bit deeper and kind of understand things and why they work the way that they work, right? Not just reacting to things and not just offering kind of like the first tier impressions, and to kind of like talk about socialization and how it's such a broad and complex topic with virtual worlds. Think about it this way. The earliest virtual worlds were all built on the concepts of mimicking whatever was on tabletop at the time. That's because virtual worlds never existed on consoles pre-PC, because PC gaming came before the console gaming, right? So meaning that virtual worlds were on PCs back in the 80s. They were back then called MUDs, multi-user dungeons. These persisted into the 90s, until eventually these games started to get a lot more graphics and actually get a lot more like mechanical gameplay. Many of these systems, though, would mimic, not all of them, but like maybe a good quarter or less, would mimic D&D roleplay systems. They would have permadeath. Sometimes they would have character sheets. They would have roleplay. They would have many other mechanics like that. So in the earliest virtual worlds, the reason that they all feel very D&D-like, Asheron's Call, EverQuest, Ultima Online, Meridian 59, Anarchy Online, Final Fantasy 11, EVE Online. I know I'm missing one or two, but anyway. Those games all seemed kind of like very D&D-like in that they had rule systems based on alignment or based on different races and stuff like that. Now, something that was also built into these games, kind of built, based on that premise as well, was that interacting with the community was part of the game, right? Not optional, like that you could just avoid it, but that it was actually just part of the game. So just a normal part of the game. And this is why early WoW in 2004, as people dub it now, classic WoW, exhibits many of these same features, where it feels very team-focused and very like play as a group, more so than the more modern WoW does. The reason for that is because WoW was, of course, based on EverQuest. And EverQuest was very much based on D&D rule systems that functioned in very similar ways. Now, how things get a bit complicating is that the early developers who were making these games were all D&D players and very long-term MUD players. For example, the Gower brothers with RuneScape, which I forgot to mention their game, which is also old as fuck. These were like turbo gamers. So a common misconception, and this is pushed in media a lot, less these days, but it was a lot pushed back then, especially with shows like The Big Bang Theory, is that like, if you're a nerd, you're antisocial. This is like a concept that was pushed for a while. I think it's partly anti-intellectualism, but I think it's also just part of misunderstanding that like, just because somebody's smart or even autistic doesn't mean that they're not social. Me as an example, but I think that that's a bit of a hard concept for some people to understand, that like when I've been in D&D parties, these are the most social people that I've interacted with. You know what I'm saying? Like some of the D&D players that I've played with are some of the most social people I've ever played with. And these are very nerdy people, right? Because being nerdy doesn't somehow change the fact that you're a human being who needs, and not once, needs social interaction. Now, the problem with things like this is that people have a lot of innate, like hidden biases and preconceived notions about socialization and where its place belongs. And so what that means is that sometimes people don't even notice that when they argue to you, they're arguing to you from a perspective that basically doesn't make any sense. So for example, you would see this always back in the day, and now it's become so commonplace that it got wrote into many of the games. But back then you would see people say stuff like, oh, how come my class can't beat this guy's class 1v1? And people would say, well, because your role is different. And that would not be a good enough answer for some people. So eventually we got things like Guild Wars 2, which basically gave everybody a heal. So then you couldn't complain about healers anymore. The problem is that they thought that that was going to make the game easier. Didn't. Any Guild Wars player knows this. Guild Wars 1 was way easier to keep people alive in, and thus play, than Guild Wars 2 is. And not even just based on combat, but based on the abilities alone. So anyway, That's the problem when you talk about this stuff. And actually, Dirty South, you say that you don't play MMOs or you hate playing them, but since you come from the FGC, you understand this intrinsically as well. Which is like, for those that don't know, FGC is Fighting Game Community. Fighting Game Community are a very vocal bunch. That doesn't mean that, oh, all of them talk trash. No, what a vocal bunch means is that they have to communicate with each other in order to organize. There's a lot of community organization, especially based on your region. So you'll have locals, majors, big tournaments come, and people were organizing constantly, organizing before, organizing during, organizing after, parties, stuff like that. In fact, one of my favorite groups of creators have an event in Houston this month called DreamCon, and it's like, I wish I could go so bad because those guys are so fucking funny, but like, that takes a fuck ton of organization. So the point that I'm trying to make is like, for some gaming communities and some communities in general outside of gaming, this is very normal to have these kinds of like human conversations constantly. I'll give you a good example. An analogy that I use is after group finders got introduced, the reason why social interactions got worsened was because group finders started to replace all social interactions for grouping, right? Instead of just some of it, it replaced all of it. And the problem there was that now you can't control the quality of your teammates. And because you can't control that, you're going to lead to more frustration. So yes, you'll get faster queue times, but you'll get way worse quality. That's why things like why things like difficulties exist. Because difficulties now alleviate a little bit of that problem. However, to bring this into the real world, the reason why this system is kind of like shit is that I grew up playing basketball. And since I'm from a particular neighborhood, I grew up playing basketball on the streets. And that means that, like, you would just pull up to a neighborhood. Hey, what's going on? They got a basketball court. Cool. Pull up with your basketball. You probably have some friends with you. Like me, I never had friends with me. But for those that don't know some of my origin stories, the reason that I didn't is because growing up, my best friend, his name is Clarence. And needless to say, Clarence was 2 grades ahead of me. A giant black dude. And he was like my best friend growing up. And there was a lot of, drama that happened with him as my friend, but there were a lot of really cool aspects. For example, after we became more friends and people found out about it, nobody would mess with me because they were too afraid of Clarence. But anyway, I would go out and I would go play basketball with Clarence. So I always felt pretty safe because even though we were kids at the time, Clarence was like a grown man. He was already a giant. And I'm a giant now. I'm bigger than him now, but at the time, he was much bigger than me. And so we would just walk around to different neighborhoods that had basketball courts. And how it would work is that it works like this in a gym too, but it's more organized in a gym. You would just see people sitting off to the side. And in order to form a group, right, to put in MMO terms, you would have to go converse and be like, hey, are you guys next? That's what you would say. Are you guys next? And they would say yes. If they already have 5, well, you know that there are 5 men going next, so you would have to get the next after them. And if you're saying, well, then how would you get players on your team? Well, people want to play. And the only way to play is to get picked up on a team. So people will say, oh, you got 2? We need 3, or whatever. So then you'll start to pick up players. Now you might say, yeah, but like, couldn't you still have bad player interactions and bad team interactions based off of those initial interactions? Technically speaking, you could. If you did absolutely no watching or had 0 awareness. And what I mean is that usually in the very beginning of the games, people do what's called a shoot around. They just practice shooting. So usually people are already looking at who they're going to pick in the shoot around. Outside of that, if you've already came off the court, like let's say you lost, but you're like the best player on the losing team, people will already have their eye on you like, hey, we'll pick you up.
So, needless to say, these types of concepts existed and they were group finding concepts, but they're not auto group finding, right? So, what that means is that you have to actually use your brain a little bit and actually evaluate, is this person going to be a good teammate? And an auto group finder, none of that is happening. Worse, once you do get a bad teammate, there's pretty much nothing you can do about it. Which is another thing that doesn't exist in pickup basketball. If someone's that bad of a teammate, you just kick them off the court. So I guess kicking systems do work in some games like Counter-Strike, but like I've been troll kicked off of Counter-Strike a few times, so I don't even know if that's the best approach. But yeah, so queuing removed, as you're saying, Dirty South, a lot of these like social interactions. And the problem with that is that it intrinsically feels like an upgrade because dopamine, faster, right? Less social interaction, better. But here's the problem. If you're interacting socially less, the game's actually less memorable. That's why classic WoW matters so much to so many players. That's why people always talk about the expansions up to Mist of Pandaria. You know, they always talk about the expansions up to this point, up to TBC, up to Wrath, up to there. Because for them, that's when the game started to change intrinsically. And so, here's the weird thing. That change is not inherently bad. It only became bad because it happened in games that were different before, right? So it was more controversial. That's why with Final Fantasy XIV, when it changed, not enough people even knew about it then, to where when it came back looking like WoW, nobody even cared because nobody really played it the first time around. Excuse me. And it was just such a better story game that people enjoyed it a lot more. Well, and it's Final Fantasy. Let's be honest. So it has the IP buff. But you kind of see what I'm saying. And so if you're wondering, well, how does it get complicated? The other complexity is, what if the developers of the game aren't social either? Now you have developers trying to design a world in which is social, in which they don't understand. So that's another big problem. It's not just players playing in a way. It's, wait, designers don't know how to be social either? Well, if you can't do that, then there's not a lot of like faith that you can actually deliver. And that's why like the biggest red flag in virtual world communities, generally speaking, is if they don't have a good community. Meaning if there isn't any like community interaction. Final Fantasy XIV's actual community is pretty delusional, but the community itself, like, and the leaders of it, like from Yoshi P's perspective, it's pretty good. There's a lot of interactivity between them. That's probably why there's so much parasociality. But to kind of get back to my point about sociality, and kind of why it becomes this double-edged sword, well, what if I told you you can play the same game, but everything is automated for you? Many people will intrinsically say yes, because that just sounds like a cool proposition. Oh, well, it's my time and I want to spend it appropriately, like people always like to say. Okay. But is playing through a game in which you don't ever interact with another player, playing it in the specific way that you want to? If the answer to that question is yes, then you should also answer these two questions. Do you play a world because of your interactivity in it? And do you play it because you like it as a prop and still like the opportunity to still interact with other players? Well, the questions lead you into two different angles. The first one is more of like, if you're trying to get a part of a community, that's a MMORPG, right? Like, these are massive games that are about interactivity between players. But if you're just trying to play a world that kind of functions like it has set pieces, and yet still has sociality just because it's an online game, then you have like pretty much every Japanese online RPG. And Guild Wars. And I would even argue ESO these days. And modern WoW even, arguably. So what I'm trying to say is that like, the balance has got shifted too much into one direction. To where instead of just having like one type or these two type of games like coexist like equally or more equally, most games right now that are virtual worlds are more classified as the smaller variant, the online RPG variant. There's nothing inherently wrong with one variant being more popular or you liking one more than the other. The problem is that when the other massive variant is somehow like erased, you have a problem. And you have a big problem because then you have a massive amount of players who've been brought in to virtual worlds from online RPGs who don't have the same interests. However, because people think these are the same types of games, those types of players are now advocating for your game. And that's what happened. So many of the non-MMO, non-social players advocated for mechanics they wanted because they didn't care about these other mechanics or understand them. And they got flowed. The industry got overflowed with this type of game. Now, I'll give you a couple of premises here. If you're playing a virtual world, should you be able to play largely alone? That's an argument that depends on whatever game you're trying to make and whatever world you're trying to create. So, for example, if you're creating Guild Wars 1, this is a world, especially post-Heroes, that's pretty much beatable 100% solo. So, I think they're pretty clear in the sand where they stand on, which is like, they want their game to be able to be played solo. However, contrast this to like Darkfall Online or, you know, whatever other game you want to plug in. And trying to play that game solo is almost even too difficult against the player versus environment encounters. But against other players, you're pretty much always going to get killed because you're by yourself. And so you might say, well, that's unfair. But that's how the world works too. Nobody in this chat right now operates solo. And this concept that Bree Royce talks about in this, where it's kind of like, well, I want to be social, but I don't want to be social. The reason that you feel that way is because you're a human being. And so what I mean is that like, because you want to be idling around other players without having to interact with them sometimes, that doesn't mean you're antisocial. It just means that you're a human being. Your human beings don't always just want one form of socialness. They'll take social stuff and social in other forms, if that makes sense. So, for example, if you're inside of a restaurant and you overhear people talking, sometimes that feels like social interaction and thus is social interaction for you. However, the problem is, and this has actually been seen statistically and in current Western society, is that when there's no more fourth places in the world to go to, or rather third places, aka a place that's outside of your work, outside of your school, and in many cases is related to a church or outside of your church. But these places don't really exist that much anymore, especially in the America. Arcades almost cease to exist, right? Many of these kinds of places, like I grew up going to a clubhouse as a kid, and I even went to Boys and Girls Club as a kid. Boys and Girls Club is still around, but the clubhouse that I used to go to isn't. And there's many more examples of this. Now, the sad thing is that virtual worlds used to be the third place for many people, myself included. The problem is that as they started to make more games, more RPGs, and less worlds, right? MMORPGs, we started to get this shift where suddenly we didn't have a third place anymore. Now, to be clear, I'm sure there's many online RPGs that serve as third places for other players. However, the thing is that for many players like myself who've had the ability to play many virtual worlds that are massive, we've tasted the gold. We tasted the carrot cake. And you're trying to feed us the wheat gold pound cake and tell us that it's the same thing. For what that type of game is, it's not the same thing. And I'll give you a good example. One time I was playing Warhammer Online. Basically just pulled up upon a dwarf player, a human, and I think a warrior priest or something like that. And we just happened to be PvPing. And we ended up killing a couple of targets together in a group. And every now and then, somebody would say a quip. The dwarf would say, I slew him with my axe. It was like some fucking Fellowship of the Ring shit. And so after the fight, we just joined a group and we started running around like a fucking fellowship, RPing in chat. And to be clear, you might say, yeah, but I could do that in another game. Well, if you're leveling in Final Fantasy XIV, you can't do that because almost none of the actual content you can do together. It's all instance or it teleports you to other places. Second, to pick on another game besides like Final Fantasy XIV, to pick on like, I don't know, even like Monster Hunter Wild or Wilds or World, either one. In these games, I have to actually invite somebody into my instance or just hope that I'm going to get some random placed into my phase that maybe I could request for help. Meaning that that's not actually a reliable way to make friends or to build a reputation with people because it doesn't function like a world. That's just a bunch of worlds spliced together, right? Because there's no actual like, hey, this person lives on this server. I met them on this server, and now I'm interacting with them on the server, where I feel connected to that server and thus the world. And so over time, because like online RPGs started to become more popular, the non-massive variant, and RPGs in general became more popular, you started to get this massive amount of players who would advocate for like, well, I don't want to ever have to play with other players. I just want to be able to do my own thing. And so the question that I always would have for those players is, if they only let you see like 8 players and they approached it the same way, would that be okay for you? And for a long time, some players would push back against that. Ironically, that's what Japan's doing right now. With Wild, with World, with before they shut it down, Dragon's Dogma. They're not even pretending to be massive with these games because they don't have to. They can still execute their world and design without having fuck tons of players. Not to mention, they literally can't have fuck tons of players because of their design. So the point that I'm trying to make is what you realize is that trying to close your eyes and pretend that these two different like schisms in the genre don't function differently is why so many games actually fail. It's actually why so many audiences also get burnt on certain games like SWTOR. When people stop seeing it like a massive online game, myself included, they started enjoying it a lot more. There's many more examples of that. But to talk about more of like the negatives of not building any good social worlds right now, and this is not picking on any developers in particular, just in general, is that what happens is you build a world where players think that you can just exist by not having to interact with other players. If you don't incentivize it, whether from giving people achievements, buffs, benefits, letting them group, letting them defeat higher end content, you basically never teach them how to overcome issues by working in a group. That's why whenever you get to the end game in games like Final Fantasy XIV, the player base is unbelievably bad because they've never had to actually learn how to overcome things as a group before that point. So suddenly it's just like, let's do these trials, even on normal, and I have many examples of this, and I'm like, these guys have max level accounts. How are they worse than me? Like, they've been playing this game way longer than me. How are they worse than me? But you realize it's not because I'm a god. Like, even though I like to fancy myself as a good player, it has nothing to do with that. It has more to do with the fact that Final Fantasy XIV wouldn't even allow me to outplay you that much anyway, based on how the combat works with 3.5 second GCDs, global cooldowns. So in reality, it's more that people don't want to actually learn the requisites that you need to actually be good at the games. And so what you realize is games like Final Fantasy XIV, there's nothing wrong with this game, nor its audience, even if they are a little bit fanboyish. The problem is, what ideas are they going to now start to espouse on the industry at large? You saw this with WoW, and you saw this with Final Fantasy XIV now as well, where I see it sometimes. Oh, I should be able to change my class easily. No, you shouldn't. In a game that's built that way, sure. But not in every game. D&D doesn't allow you to even do that. Like, what the fuck? Like, see the point I'm making is like, D&D is massively popular right now, but people want to pretend that like, because Final Fantasy XIV is doing well, or other games that allow you to have multiple class systems, that's the only way to do it. It's like, of course it's not. There's many more ways to do it. Seems like I'm picking on Final Fantasy 14, but that's just the easiest one. What would be the best way for a designer to make an experienced returning player learn a reworked system? It's a good question. I'm a fan of pop-up tutorials, personally, but I'm also a fan of like designing particular content packages that are just for returning players. So since you've been gone, and so like again, the point isn't that you can't like one type of game over the other. The point is if you ever find yourself advocating against a particular type or only advocating for one particular type in spite of an industry, you're not just a fanboy, you're destructive because you're trying to argue that your one type of virtual world is the end all be all. And the beauty of virtual worlds is that that's not true. There's so many different ways to do it. And I think that by not allowing players to rely on their skills as human beings and thus like increase those skills by having more social interactions and grouping better, you're literally degrading how effectively people can use those skills, especially even when they get to end levels. And so like people want to talk about why the Final Fantasy 14 leveling experience is so bad. It's not just because it's boring and easy. It's because there's no interactivity with the actual world besides the characters that you're, clicking through the cutscenes with. So, like, just feels like a Final Fantasy game, but a shitty one. At that point. And yeah, later on, especially after Heaven's Sword, there starts to be a lot more open-ended zones where it feels like you're interacting with players more. Well, that's because that's what players want to feel and do. So even if you're not grouping with those players, you still kind of are interacting with them. Don't get me wrong, the idea of public questing is not bad because it's done openly, right? There's no like negotiations. No, public questing is a great idea because guess what happens in public questing? Grouping. It's an organic place to create grouping. And that's the kind of stuff that has to exist. You need stuff like that. But you also need more than just being a combatant in a world. You need socialization. You need other tasks, and you need players to not be able to do everything in the game. Otherwise, you're just creating more and more reasons why people don't have to socialize. And look, I'll get grim for a second. With virtual worlds in the state that they are now, where socialization is not a focus for like the vast majority of the top 10 of them, the problem with this is that we're not that much different or unique from like lobby shooters, lobby RPGs, or other online games. We lose our uniqueness. And on top of that, worse, we're losing ability as nerds and human beings. So it's a really hard mentality to break against because people will say, they'll argue with their feelings. Yeah, but I get home late from work and I just want to be able to queue up and instant like pop into something. Here's the thing. There probably should be something like that in the game that exists for you. Right? I think so. There should be. But should it be the only way to play the game? No, because then you're never actually forming any meaningful connections with the game or with the people that you're interacting with. And again, at that point, it's like you might say, yeah, but why do you need to? Because the point is to elevate the experiences in virtual worlds. We don't want them to be subpar just because, like, no, we want them to get better. And the other problem is that when you're building characters throughout the story included to feel like they are hero god, characters, that's another reason why people can't interact with other players. Like, I'll give you a good example. Guild Wars 2 is a great example of this. It has public questing, but like, since it's not as like active at the lower levels and stuff like that, you'll probably end up missing playing with most players. And by the time you end up playing with players at the higher levels, you'll realize that like the end game level players are so much better than you that it feels almost like an unsurmountable like mountain. And the reason that that game has that problem is because it trivialized all of the group content leading up to that point. It used to have challenging group content, but it got rid of it because of players like this complaining, saying, I don't want dungeons to be difficult at level 30. The problem is that whenever you get to level 80, you're going to get rocked. And it's going to make you quit. So a lot of these developers started trading, well, at least you'll be in the game longer, thinking that that was the better approach. But the problem is sometimes setting a harder boundary and losing some of those players at level 30 is better, because then you're going to ruin some of the experiences of other players at level 80. Hey, what's up, Tamara? From Egypt. Crazy story, but my uncle, or uncle-in-law, as you would say, is Egyptian. They immigrated. His family immigrated. He was born in the U.S. I'm pretty sure he was born in the U.S. Don't quote me on that, but and now he's extremely successful. So good on him. But their family was already very educated, even in Egypt before then. So very different culture, especially compared to our like cultures in my family. Yeah, so I'll talk about the kind of like the Discord and the like the voice chat stuff, because people use that as a point sometimes. So one thing I want to make clear is that voice chats have existed since I've been playing virtual worlds. Like the first time someone asked me to join a TeamSpeak was like 2002. Like it was like a long time ago. Like so like these online voice services have existed for ages. Now, the differences between them and Discord is that there were no like public servers unless you just went and joined a public server that you would have to connect to. So what I'm trying to say is like, yes, public servers existed in Ventrilo, but most people didn't use them for that sort of thing. Most people just use them for trolling. I don't want to overgeneralize, because I know people that did use them in this way, but I don't think it was as widespread as Discord is. I'm trying to be fair to the Discord arguments. Now, that being said, Discord in the current state, the reason that it feels like it replaces social interaction in Final Fantasy XIV, I'm going to hurt some feelings, but it's because the social interaction that happened in Final Fantasy XIV was just based on a chat room. So, meaning that if I'm changing my chat room to a better chat room with a voice service, then technically it is replacing the social interactions that I was having, but it replaced them because they were very shallow. Like, you understand what I'm saying? And I'll give you a great example. Try playing using public lobbies or something like that in a sandbox game like EVE Online or Darkfall. What you'll find is you'll probably get tricked a lot, killed, have a lot of crazy ass interactions happen if you try and play the game that way. Because you're basically just shooting in the dark, right? So yeah, like socialization, if it feels like it's replaced by something like Discord, it's because the socialization that's taking place is very shallow, right? So a way that you can fix that is by adding more things in the game. And what that means is like actual places and locations that can be interacted at and with. So for example, having a club that you can DJ at or create music at has been attempted in a few games very successfully. But if you don't have a mechanic like this, you won't have a nightclub scene. As funny as that sounds, right? If there's no gambling in your game, which I know the Golden Saucer and Final Fantasy XIV has this, there's no gambling scene. You need all these other things in the game. Have social interactions take place at mini games, right? Betting, sports, like In fact, sports is such a great example of such a missing link in these video games. I'm sure Dirty South FGC could um, agree with me. Is like MMOs have like no mention of sports, even just period, most of the time. So you're alienating a massive amount of people in the world. I mean, hundreds of millions of people who watch football, soccer, baseball, basketball, you name it, fighting. This is millions of people. If there's none of that in your game, there's no betting on sports, there's no teams, guilds for sports or team sports, right? And that's the kind of stuff that's missing in virtual worlds. So, yeah, think about it. If you're just talking in Discord, typing in Discord, as the game's taking place that you're watching and betting on in the game, how are you going to be doing both at the same time? The chances are actually very low because the level of activity that it requires is much higher. You see what I'm saying? So you're going to be glued in game, typing in game, being like, oh, I'm going to bet, but. You're not going to be in Discord typing that stuff out. You might be in voice chat, but you won't be in Discord typing it out. And I think that that's the problem, is if your game's replaceable by a Discord text chat, it means your game doesn't have any social interactions in it. And I think that that's why, I feel for these players, because it seems like I'm just advocating for total sociality. No, the issue is that, like, if you don't actually build the barriers correctly, you actually create bigger barriers for the players that are less capable of ever getting involved. And I'll give you 2 examples. Most people in the world don't like to just get beat up until they get better at something. That's the concept of martial arts in a nutshell. It's also the concept of many PvP games, including FGC games. That being said, this is not the majority of how people find enjoyable to improve at something. So then how do you fix that? The way you fix that is you give them progressive difficulty increases. This happens even in martial arts. Like, for example, my gym is very controlled. And so, like, if I'm going with a beginner who's brand new or just a couple of weeks, my instructor will tell me, hey, this person's brand new. And all that, it immediately clicks into my mind. I'm not going to try to submit them. I'm going to let them, like, squeeze on me and try to do some crazy shit. And then I'm going to show them how it doesn't work. It's kind of like my approach for that. Now, if somebody tells me this guy's a fucking competitor and, do blue of blah, blah, blah place, then I'm going to be like, okay, let me at least protect myself. Maybe he'll kick my ass, but let me at least protect myself. You see what I'm saying? Having these like safeguards to where you're not just getting routed is so important. And the problem with Final Fantasy XIV is the casual player base thinks that they have safeguards because they have difficulty levels. In reality, you don't really. And what I'm saying is that if the game's not actually built for being played on normal, and it's more so being built for being played on the difficulties that come after that, not only are you getting a subpar experience, but you feel like you're getting the same type of experience. And I hate to break it to you, but that means that you advocate for participation trophies. And look, I know I'm going to rattle some feathers. I don't believe that difficulty modes are bad inherently, but I think that participation trophies are bad. And I think that pretending that people are playing the same game is not good. And I think that pretending that this isn't going to have consequences, like why Yoshi P has to even address his own fan base and be like, hey guys, get good, is because of that, right? There's a beauty in chase a elusive casual audience who plays for a couple of hours but still pays the same. The problem is that they don't have the same level of loyalty for your game and product than maybe other players and people do. And so for them, they're just waiting for the next best thing to come and drop, right? If Final Fantasy XIV is not Final Fantasy as an IP, does it have the same effect? I don't even think anywhere close. And this is another point that I like to make to people, is that the contained content expansion to expansion style approach, it's not sustainable. And that's why only the biggest publishers can do it. So it's not that I'm trying to sit here and be a meanie head and say nobody should do these types of games. The problem is that that's all the big publishers are doing right now. And they're the only ones that can make those types of games, so they're taking advantage of it in a sense. The thing is that if they put a little bit of innovation and put their stomach into it, put their gut into it, they could also come up with MMORPGs that have far greater reaches. And I'll give you a great example. What game is more engaging and more influential in culture? Minecraft or Elder Scrolls Online? Minecraft, right? What about Ark Survival versus New World? Ark Survival. It's much bigger. Orders of magnitude bigger. Gotta see what I'm getting at here. What I'm getting at here is that, like, currently as it speaks right now, the survival genre and smaller online RPGs, I don't want to say smaller because they're not really small. I'll say that survival games have been beating up on the MMORPG and online RPG genre for a while now, to the point to where I was watching a group of guys play Minecraft, and I've said this many times before, including with the creator of fucking Muds, by the way. And him and I had a conversation where we both unequivocally stated Minecraft is an MMO. It has servers capable of 1,000+ players. It has procedurally generated worlds with jobs and tasks throughout. NPCs with roles and tasks roaming around the maps. Mobs you can kill, things you can create. A complete voxel world or a cubicle world, whatever they call it, that you can customize and break down and interact. Like, I know there's people in chat that are like, fuck Minecraft, but Minecraft is revolutionary. And the reason I'm bringing it up for those that don't know the backstory, the guy that created it was a virtual world developer who wanted to make proc gen stuff. So, like, what I'm saying is that virtual world nerds and developers in the space truly is a forum for the greatest technological advancements that we could see. I mean, Ultima Online taught us that avatars were even a thing online, right? Galaxies, excuse me, made us realize that we could adopt another identity. Guild Wars 1 taught us that you could play entirely through a world with just your friend. APB taught us that a character creator could be so customizable, it's better than a single player game. Like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, virtual world, I can give you examples, even of failed games, that were incredibly innovative, that had insane leaps of technology for us. And we're not getting those anymore. And a large reason is because they're trying to narrowly construct a particular type of game, the Japanese style of online RPG. This is not the only style of online RPG. And Minecraft, ironically, is proof of that. So, if the West wants to keep losing to the East, we should keep making crappy copies of their games. But if we want to make like innovation and get ahead, we should probably start making what we've always made, which is massive games. Because the chances of beating Japan at what they're the best at, it literally hasn't happened yet. Who's beating Japan right now? In online RPGs or even just RPGs? Nobody. They have like 4 games that have sold over 20 million. Like, what the fuck? That's insane. Like, for reference, they have 3 recent games that have sold upwards of Destiny as a franchise. Like, and Destiny as a franchise is 11 years old, 2 games, and fucking 18 expansions. You see what I'm saying? Like, the order of magnitude that the West is getting outscaled virtual world-wise is crazy. But it's coming from the fact that we're not using our greatest talents. We're not making games that are based on social interactions, which is always what we've been best at. RuneScape. Is RuneScape a game you can do everything solo in? No. Can you do a lot solo? Yeah. And that's the genius of the game. It's not built just to be solo. The Gower brothers have never stated anything close to that fact. But they wanted to build a world in which you could still be an RPG player in, while you're not having to interact with other players. So that's normal. It's more so when players start to sneak in the more insidious thoughts with that ideology. Oh, but yeah, for me, I don't know if I ever want to have to, like, learn this button rotation. Can't you just remove it, Yoshi P? Like, that was thousands of people arguing for many of the characters that got nerfed or got abilities reworked to be reworked. Because that's the ideology you start to push. But can you make it easier? Can you make it easier? Can you make it easier? The truth is, social interaction past a point, it's not that easy. And that's okay. You don't always have to do it. And when you do it, you have the beauty of having so much information ahead of you because you're playing a virtual world. So you're not getting rejected in person. Have you played Mortal Online 2? Is there anything you strongly like or dislike about it? Um, so I've been a Mortal supporter for a long time. The problem I have with the game is that it's always felt incredibly jank. And I think the combat system just feels like it feels worse than Age of Chivalry. And that game is 16 years old. Yeah. That's just more my problem with games like Mortal is they try to do the RPG route and the action route, and while I think that that's a cool idea, what you have to realize is that with games like Oblivion and Morrowind, what they proved is that if you try to do that past a point, the games break because they're RPGs. And so you can really try to balance around that, but you'll always have to slow the game down. You always have to nerf people's power levels. There's always things that you're going to have to affect negatively because of that. I'm not arguing against it, period. I'm just saying there's 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 difficulties that come with that. The Mortal Online 2 of late, the last time I saw gameplay, it does look much improved. So maybe I should go give it a look. But another thing that I dislike about a lot of virtual world developers, including Mortal Online 2 and the developers, they've historically been pretty stupid. And what I mean is that, like, when you are designing a virtual world where you're trying to be big-headed and kind of like really like, this is the world we want to create, which is really admirable. With that sometimes comes an inability to actually have a community and interact with them. Mortal Online and Darkfall Online both have development teams that were like that. And the reason I've always disliked that is because it's just like, if you just put a little bit more effort in, you could get way more people interested into your games. But because Mortal Online doesn't put any effort into that stuff, including whenever I've reached out to them before, they literally like left me on red. It's just like, wouldn't that have been a perfect opportunity to advertise your game with me? And that's not even like paid advertisement, but even just like putting a link or something. It just doesn't make sense to me. Whenever some games have done this with me, like Darkfall Online, I got like over 2,000 referrals. So like, I have an impact, especially on small games. But if you don't have the kind of developer who can recognize that stuff, then, that's on you. The irony is Discord was made by former Final Fantasy XIV players. Oh. What do I think of Elder Scrolls Online? I think it's nothing like an Elder Scrolls game. Sadly. But I think it's, if you can like remove that part, or if you don't care about TES like I do, I'm a fanboy for Morrowind. I mean, people saw me in chat last week on Discord. Like, I'm a massive fanboy. I've beaten Morrowind like 3 times, which is way too many. It's too many times, because even beating it once took forever. Because I was literally like 11. But if you're not like a super TES fan, I think Elder Scrolls is great. Even if you're just like a fantasy fan, but you don't even like care that much about Elder Scrolls, I think it can be fun for you, especially if you're more so into narrative experiences. The problem is that if you're like me and you actually played the Elder Scrolls games, the Elder Scrolls games were never easy narrative experiences. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, it's such a weird juxtaposition that I have to always explain to Elder Scrolls Online players, and they're always like, huh, oh yeah, because they don't even think about that because they don't come from that background of like, I grew up playing Morrowind where I used to tell my uncle like every week, man, uncle, I don't even know if I could beat this game. I both didn't think it was a beatable game, and it was just such a hard and complex game. Now, not just hard because of knowledge base, but because the difficulty in the game was hard. I didn't even play on hard modes as a kid. I do now, but as a kid, I didn't. But sometimes you run into a monster in Morrowind, you can't even kill him if you don't have the correct items. Sometimes you run into a tomb on accident, and that dude's fucking steroided out of his mind, and he just like, whoops your ass. You're like, what the fuck? Like, that's Morrowind. And, you know, some other online RPGs too, like RuneScape, where suddenly you pull up on a guy, he's level fucking 40, and you're like, what the hell? And he just like smokes you. Like me, whenever I go to that fucking bandit city, the one where you're learning your like, what is it? Where you leap through stuff or whatever. I forgot what that one's called. I was training that. But anyway. So like that's my issue with the game. It's like the lore in Elder Scrolls is very heavy. It's a lore heavy game. Skyrim, the most popular of the Elder Scrolls games by a country fucking mile, I'm pretty sure, right? Isn't like Skyrim like way more popular than the other ones? Like let's just fact check that. Elder Scrolls sales. Okay. For reference. Skyrim has sold 3 times more than Oblivion. And wait for this. Dang. Like 7 times more than Morrowind. So like for like the reason that matters, it's not to be like, oh, those are better because they sold more. Like that's such a stupid, lazy argument. The point is that most players are aware of Skyrim. So by the time that they played Elder Scrolls Online, they probably played Skyrim first. So Elder Scrolls Online from Skyrim feels like a worse action game, 100 billion%, which is why everybody complains about the combat. But the narrative's not that much worse or different, really. Like, maybe presentation's worse in Elder Scrolls Online. But you see what I'm saying? That if you played Morrowind or Daggerfall first, these games are hard as fuck. Like, really hard. But then guess what? They become comically easy once you know how to beat them. Oblivion is the same. Play it on expert, it's hard as fuck, and then you realize you can juggle potions in your mouth while you're fucking eating apples, paralyzing people for 10 seconds, and jumping so high up in the air you can just jump on buildings. Like, you realize, oh, this game's easy. But it's like a progressive thing in both of those games. The story is such a big focus. Oblivion and Morrowind have tons of books, side quests that are very expansive, expansions that are very expansive as well, like extremely expansive expansions. Like, no pun intended. So, you see what I'm saying? So, like, I'm really diving into this, but that's because if you want to ask these questions to me, you're going to get a big answer, which is like, I'm a big TES fan. So, like, when I play Elder Scrolls Online, it doesn't feel like an Elder Scrolls game to me. It feels like a generic online game that happens to be fantasy. And that's okay. I don't even think it's necessarily bad. I just don't think it's that great at what it's trying to be. The thing about exploiting, though, with betting is that the way betting can work is that you can also have an arbitrator. So if betting just happens loosely, then corruption can happen, just like in the real world. But if there's arbitrators, if people aren't betting and trying to throw matches, for example, then corruption can happen. there's ways that someone could actually check that. And while there's still ways around that, like in the end, you can never truly trick MMO players. Let's be honest. And thinking in that mindset is actually like fairly autistic. And I understand that I'm autistic, but it's like you'll never be able to stop true nerds. If you think that, you haven't played enough D&D. I remember playing with this girl one time, short little tiny nerd, super unassuming. She's like a bubbly personality. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. I'm in a group of people who want to have fun and really focus on role playing. Game starts, and I find out she's created a god character, and she's like a god like tier. Like she plays like all the time, and she's like obsessed with the mechanics. And I'm just like, ready. But like she was like power gamed out of her mind. But anyway, there's so many examples I can give you about Elder Scrolls Online not feeling like an Elder Scrolls game, besides just the story sucking is like by comparison. It's also the gameplay. Morrowind and Oblivion are difficult games. Elder Scrolls Online is so easy. I can kill the bosses while I'm like with my eyes closed. So it's just like, I don't know. Ever since I was a kid, I've always been obsessed with beating games and like playing games mechanically well, just because it's fun to me. And when a game feels like too easy, and it doesn't feel like you're really increasing your skill cap at all while you play it, I lose interest very quickly. That's probably why I love so many Japanese games, because they focus on that a lot in the combat and gameplay loops. Yeah, James, no, exactly. And that's the kind of point I'm trying to make. I'm not, I tongue in cheek say like Final Fantasy 14 players suck, but it's like, no, but statistically they do. I'm trying to have a serious discussion about it of like, why is that? And it's because nothing is preparing you for the actual game. Guild Wars 2 has the same problem, but a completely different outcome because of how the game plays. And someone in chat can back me up on this, but like, I have played with Guild Wars 2 players for the first time, tons of them, way more than probably most players here. Um, but like if you go talk to Mighty Teapot or some other players who are always trying to onboard new players, they have this experience like I do too, which is that there's a point where you're playing with someone in Guild Wars 2. I was playing with my cousin. My cousin's a really good gamer, okay? We run into this fight and he goes, I'm like, you good? Like, I always ask him, hey, are you good? And he goes, I don't even know what happened. Like, in this PvP match, and I was just like, it dawned on me in that moment again. I was like, yeah, fuck, I've been playing these games for so long, especially Guild Wars, that it's just like, I forget that Guild Wars 2 has such a hard floor. That you pass the floor, and then there's this high fucking ceiling. So it's like, not only do you have to be good at a base level, that gives you this overconfidence of being like, oh, I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. You get to max level, start PvPing or doing strikes or raids or whatever they call them these days, and you're like, oh, what the fuck? And so me talking about this stuff is not just because I'm a difficulty fucking homer and I want everyone to be elite. No, it's because literally, if you guys want to play a more challenging game, more fulfilling game at the end, there has to be moments like that in between. Otherwise, you'll end up with these outcomes that we've already talked about. I saw the thumbnail of the live here and thought, what the hell is Jack Harlow doing? Warframe has so many things that Destiny really should have done, but yeah, so that's the thing is that in my comments I got a lot of Warframe posters, and at first I was just like, Warframe posters are clout chasers. Anytime their game isn't mentioned, but it's a game that's adjacent to their game, they always try to like attack the comments with it. But to be honest, I don't blame them in this case. And the reason being is all these Warframe players are looking at Destiny being like, look at all that money they had, and they made a worse game than ours. Like, That's how a lot of them feel. And I know Destiny players might feel differently, but I mean, Warframe players have a point when they say that, hey, our content's free. And you're like, oh. With all due respect, but the West now focuses on woke stuff in game and shows, so I don't think they will beat Japan in that. I mean, Japan is extremely woke. I don't know where people are getting this idea that Japan's not a woke like place. Like, it's just that the way that they handle their themes are based on their cultural expectations and understandings of them. So, for example, when people complain about female samurai, not only have I talked to Japanese people about this, but I've heard from other Japanese people, including in Japan, not a single Japanese person complained about it. Like, that I know, based on like interactions, based on other gamers. Like, I'm not saying the entire population, but you see what I'm saying? Like, so the cultural, like the culture war woke stuff, I actually think is more of a Western invention and Western understanding of things. So when people try to look at like a Japanese game and say, oh, this is like woke or this is non-woke because of these concepts, in reality, Japan doesn't even approach it. They're just doing things their own way. So, there's a reason that they've always been seen as controversial. It's not because they're not a puritanical, very closed traditional culture. They are. It's because if you overly try to constrict and control people, they'll end up blossoming in different ways. And that's why their night scene is so crazy. Because you can't expect people just to work to the bone without any individualism for them to not want to go crazy a little bit, you know? How do I feel about Valheim and Enshrouded? I don't know much about Enshrouded, but I know Valheim's a pretty cool concept. And I think that survival games are fulfilling nice niches that the virtual world industry just gave up on even trying to fill. Let's be honest. Like, what's the last virtual world that tried to have building? Like, New World. And RuneScape Dragon Wilds, I think it's just a natural kind of like move for RuneScape to go for something like that. The problem that I have is that I'm a bit worried about the future of RuneScape. I know people are still into old school RuneScape and blah 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 blah, but I'm just thinking like RuneScape 3 is not very light. And Jagex has like 10 owners since then. And has like 4 failed game projects. So I just hope that they're on the up, you know? I hope they do something cool. I saw your post, Madness. It was funny. So somebody had this post. I'll show it on screen. I wasn't making that argument, Jeff55369 says. Corporations tried to push the woke stuff because they thought it would bring them money. It just so happens they're wrong. BlackRock was pushing the ESG initiative. BlackRock. BlackRock. The fuck does BlackRock have to do with this fucking video, weirdo? Like, if you find yourself talking conspiracy lingo around me, first off, like, go away, please. But second off, like, why? It's not even related to any of this shit. And second off, there's a part here where it says, also, corporations aren't monoliths. Actually, by design, they are. Guess how they're monolithic? Because there's prerequisites to become a corporation. Because you have to register as a corporation. How do I know this stuff? Because I worked for a Fortune 500 company and I own my own business. Like, Fortune 500 companies are corporations. Yeah, so they function like a corporation does. So what am I trying to say here? Corporations make moves that they think are going to make them money. They never make them for social issues. Never. If you are dumb enough to think that a corporation, if it ever thought it wouldn't make money from a social issue and supporting it, would support a social issue. I have oceanfront property in the fucking Sahara Desert next to that dude in fucking Egypt to sell you. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, what the corporations have to make money. It's literally the prerogative of how they're designed. In the US, corporations don't have limits. What this means is that while in some European countries, there might be limitations placed on corporations, they can't just keep chasing ever-ending profit. In the US, there isn't. So you can keep chasing ever-ending profit. And so, the board just wants more profit. That's why it seems like video game companies, when they get really big sometimes, make super stupid decisions. It's because they're making business decisions that seem like they make sense with dollars and cents, but when you break it down into gaming, it makes no fucking sense. And I'll give you a great example. I've had this conversation with many developers, but I've always been like, why is it that publishers think that you can make money off of, and developers even, think you can make money off of virtual worlds when they're long-term investments by nature? Meaning, who buys properties and says, oh wow, I'm making my money back in 2 years? Nobody does. Nobody in real estate does that. What the fuck? And I don't even do real estate. I don't even have the fucking money. I can't even afford a shack. But you see what I'm saying? Like, if you're flipping properties in real estate, you wouldn't do it that way. So then, why is it that suddenly, like, bad business got supported and excused for such a long time? Because it's like, well, it's just big business doing big business, and the games failed because they failed. It's like, no, these are separate things sometimes. That's what my series tries to show. Is like, sometimes, like, big corporations like Ubisoft make dumbass decisions because they're just a big corporation. But sometimes they also make decisions that are bad because they've lost the plot. Or they've lost a lot of their OG developers. What's a great example of this? Recently, there's a game called, like, Claire Obscura, I think? Obscura? Can somebody fact check that in chat? Claire Obscura 33. It's like a French-based French RPG. So it's incredibly unique just on the face of that. But it's also unique because it has a unique approach to things. Now, this company and this game, the reason why it's so impactful, not just because it's successful, it's actually formed of former Ubisoft developers, or Ubisoft developers. And so what does that mean? It means that by Ubisoft treating itself like a business constantly, they lost a lot of quality. And when they lost their quality, that quality went and created other games. Now, we've seen this with other games, or other publishers, Square Enix. Why did they keep banging their head against the live service wall when it seems like it's not making them any money? Because all it takes is for one of them to hit, and that can make them money. And they also seem to be kind of delusional that that's the only style of game they can make, apparently. So, like, you see what I'm saying? What I'm trying to argue is that sometimes, like, people will think too much about business and get overridden by the business aspects, while other people, mostly the gamers, will then use gaming arguments way too much when sometimes the business matters more. So if the question is there good business in virtual worlds? The answer is, of course there is. The difficulty is if you're not efficient with your development, you'll be like Riot Games spending 15 million every year on a game that we haven't ever even seen a trailer for. Like, so having a lot of money can make things easier, but it also can make things more difficult when suddenly your expectations and ideas are too grand to actually quantify, and you don't actually have like a a team that can actionably work on things. I appreciate that tomorrow. Final French to see. But really, literally. Like, that's the exact vibe I got when I watched it. But there's cool aspects that they added in there. Like the flow of the combat is always a problem that I've had with typical TBS systems in Final Fantasy and why I prefer the ABS systems. The active battling systems. It is robust. And especially it's like virtual worlds are the easiest thing to scope creep on. Because basically you need to have your end game, and Card and I, my moderator and good friend, talk about this a lot. Like, you need to have good ideas of where where your world's gonna end when you're making it. That way you know what the scale of it's going to be. So for example, you could create a small world and then keep adding parts to the world, but your gameplay and initial world better be good enough that you can keep adding things to it. If not, you're probably better off making another game. Right? So I think knowing what your approach is going to be in that sense also helps a lot. Because if you just, say I'm going to make a mass space simulator, well, you're going to end up like Star Citizen, where it's like, what are we even making anymore? And on top of that, when is it even going to be made? Because this is technically an ever-expansive idea. But yeah, the part that I forgot to mention at the end of that post was pretty funny. It reads, if being partnered with Sweet Baby was a good thing, then why throw a fit when people point it out? Because when people point it out, they usually just exhibit, for example, in the case of, Sweet Baby and Concord and other games like that, they point it out because they think they're making a salient point. You're not. That's like somebody's car stopping and you being like, it's because global warming. It's like, is the answer technically maybe kinda yes? Like, I guess. Um, kind of. But it's also completely unrelated to whatever you're doing and talking about in that moment. Like, remember, I've talked about this before on stream, but if you think a consultancy company wouldn't join a development team if they were literally organizing more than just side aspects of their game and aka contract themselves into the game's development, again, you're extremely naive, and I'm telling you that as a consultant. I would never create content for somebody that they could wholesale sell as their own and not give me credit for, which Sweet Baby never got any credit except for assisting on narrative aspects. So meaning that if they did more, they would have credited themselves with it. They want the credit. Like, when you break down these arguments, you realize these are just people repeating things they've read or been told. Because there's no actual thought behind the first idea. Once I pick a pen through it and I push through it, you have someone saying, why throw a fit when people point it out? Throw a fit means that I'm mocking it? Like, I don't think me mocking something for being fucking stupid is throwing a fit. Like, I'm just explaining how the world works. You're explaining how conspiracies work in your head, which I'm not interested in. Yeah, I don't know either, Madness, to be honest. That's a good question. I mean, I only know the virtual world industry like the back of my hand. The other industries, while I might have a lot of affinity for them or study them a lot, the truth is I can't tell you why that is. I don't know why turn-based combat works in the way that it does as a zeitgeist, if you will. I can tell you why combat works in virtual worlds, though, in the different systems. But yeah, I'd have to learn more about that. I don't know about that SWBF tour, but I was a long time player of the Rainbow Six series, so I've been playing Rainbow Six since I think like the second one. Um, but needless to say, as you probably guessed, Vegas for me is like an arcade game, so it's not really Ghost Recon for me. But hey, Rainbow Six Vegas was a completely different game before that, so they just doubled down on the kind of game that they were making. So I can't really hold that against them. They also brought that game back from the brink when it started off kind of poorly. So sometimes, like, what you realize is like things just aren't for you. And yeah, you know, those games just aren't for me. Nah, it is funny, Robust. It's also funny when people see me smoke, like, see me eat, or hear me shit post or make memes and chat or like be like, spaghetti, you gotta fuck you, and you gotta fuck Bowser. Like, you know, the fact that I know those memes like is a bit surprising to some people. But like, hey Skeletal, my dude. Hey Skeletal. Um but but I like to kindly remind people I'm a fucking loser, okay? I'm a nerd. Like I grew up on the fucking internet. Um yes, I had a real life, but it was mainly stealing candy, skipping school, and reading books. Like, I didn't start playing sports until I was much older. Video games more so, you know, defined my life. So, yeah, like sometimes I'll get comments where people are like, "Damn, nerd, I'm always surprised when you've played like fucking 40 of these games that you've like covered," and I'm just like, bro, I've played more than that. Like out of like the 200 games I've covered or 150 games I've covered, I've probably played like 100 of them. And probably like 50 of them in like great detail. Now, my superpower was being young, having issues, right, mentally, and having fuck tons of time. So I would always put in a lot of time. Now, the other thing too that's a bit surprising for people is when I make fun of things like this is that for the people that know me personally, that's how I am all the time. Like, I'm always mocking myself, being self-aggrandizing slash self-deprecating, or I'm joking about my friends, or they're joking about me. Kind of just like how you operate when you come from like a shitty walk of life. Humor is kind of how you mask everything. So it's really funny, like as I've increased my audience, um, your understanding doesn't increase. It's inverse, argue. You know what I'm saying? Like, as it increases, I make more videos. Maybe I break 400K this year. That's a goal of mine. I'm at 390. Again, after my hacking, I think I was like 389 before I got hacked. And I lost like, oh boy, 7K. I lost a lot after I got hacked. That's why it's funny when people are like, "Oh, you lost so many subs after you know, you made bad videos." It's like, honestly, I lost more subs from getting hacked than the subs I've lost in my entire career of YouTube. Anyway, but point being is like the understanding doesn't increase. The streams will get bigger. There'll be more people in chat that I'll try my best to always remember everybody and interact with everybody as I do, even if it takes me forever. But that'll decrease, you know? And interactions on my YouTube videos will decrease. And I'm not saying, and like I mentioned this on my Discord recently from my Discord, you know, fan base, if you will. And I told them, like, I've been trying to spend a lot more time here because I'm realizing that this is pretty much inevitable. My migration away from that sort of stuff. Because, and for people wondering why, like, my channel was pretty much molded by my audience. That's why my audience matters so much to me, especially my core audience. I mean, there's people in chat here that have been there for fucking ages. Like Des, Madness. Some of these people have been here for years. So they know that this is true, that my content shifted because my audience shifted my content in a good way, to be clear. And I think what that also meant is that over time I had to kind of have to grow up a little bit and realize the internet doesn't work the same way it used to. And what that means is that YouTube section, my first, 2 years was amazing. Well, when I say first 2 years, I mean the first 2 years, the first time I started doing this. Because I've been on YouTube since like 2006. But I had tons of great interactions, conversations, suggestions, and all of that stuff. Now the chances that I get that are much lower. And most of the time that I get the best suggestions and advice and criticism, it comes from the people that are already watching my content the most. So yeah, it's kind of like, this weird thing where it's like people imagine creating art online and people see you for your most popular like content, which is just a part of your personality. And then they form this like mental picture of who you are as a person, which, to be clear, anyone that knows me knows what I'm about to say, which is that shit's fucking weird. Okay. I'm super anti-parasociality. It's a reason why my audience is actually smaller, ironically. And what I mean by that is that if you look at the most popular creators in video games, even in my space, they are much better at handling parasocial interactions than I am. That's not even a debate. I've met many of these people. They're just better at dealing with it than I'm a weird nerd who thinks that people actually want to be my friend, so sometimes I'm like, I don't like parasociality. You know what I'm saying? Because I realize I'm like, this person doesn't actually care about me or know me or want to know me. They just think they know me or liked my content and thus know me. So I think if I didn't care that much about that stuff, this stuff wouldn't really matter that much to me. But because I care about it, it's hard for me to be like, just don't worry about it, you know? Yeah, no, exactly. Exactly. Once, like, to be clear, when I stream on my YouTube channel sometimes, and I'm actually playing a game or showcasing a game, I can get like 1,000+ people. I've done it a few times, and when I've done it, it's always been like crazy overwhelming. But want to know why I always end up liking it in some ways? Because I'll get little comments like what someone said today. Oh, I didn't know you looked like this. I didn't know you sound like this. I didn't know you were from the South. I didn't know you had an accent. I didn't know you could speak Spanish or whatever the fuck they say. They said like random shit about me as a person. Observations about me as a person. Yeah, as you guys can probably tell, as some of the OGs can tell, I pretty much ignore compliments most of the time. You have to think, when you get complimented a lot for the same sort of stuff, you're not making stream. Sorry, I know people do this for streaming, but I don't stream to get compliments. I stream to have discussions and connect with my audience more on personal. So I appreciate it. I'm not trying to be like, oh, I'm just saying, like, if I don't react to it, that's why I don't react, because I don't have a reaction to it. Like, people say the Jack Harlow thing a lot. People say that your eyes. People say, oh, I didn't know, you look like that or whatever. It's like, yeah, I appreciate it. But that's that's all it's gonna get for me is like a thumbs up. The most platonic thumbs up. Yeah, it's a huge problem with the internet, but I think that the problem in general is more so like it's actually two things that butt against each other. It's hero worship butting against parasociality. So you worship somebody as like a hero. Like, so I'll give you a great example. One time I had this troll response to this guy. Um, I think it was 2 years ago, or I don't remember what video it was, but it was one of the videos that I had where some of the OG people that played the game were like angry at me. And I remember I posted this like really funny meme, and it might be one of the memes I've saved in my wall of fame, but it was like something along the lines of me being like 8,000 words, and this is the best you could do. Like it was like me returning what he said to himself. And I remember somebody sent me a message one time, because you can get message requests either on YouTube. Well, back in the day, you could get message requests on YouTube, but you'll get emails because my email's public, or I'll get message requests on Discord. So I got a message on Discord. This happened a few times after, since then, like especially with the StarCraft and Titanfall videos. But this was the first time it happened. I get a message, and it's from a guy that I actually recognize. It was somebody who posted in a lot of my videos. So I was like, huh, I remember this guy. And he goes, hey, what is this about? And he like shows me a screenshot of like me trolling somebody. And I was like, what is this about? What do you mean? And I was like, I can explain it autistically to you. This is a person saying something dumb. This is me responding with a troll meme-like response. And the person was just like, I just can't believe you would say that to somebody. And I was like, wait, could you explain to me why you couldn't believe why I would say that? And they were like, well, it's just because it's like rude. And I was like, I don't actually think that that's that rude. And they were like, oh, okay. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, and do you think how they responded to me was like particularly like nice? They're like, no. And I'm like, well then, do I always have to meet rudeness with politeness? Well, and I was like, well, no. I'm not a cop. I'm not a grade school teacher. I'm not a doctor. I'm literally a fucking shitposter nerd who makes content online. So like whatever weird standard. And I wrote this out to the person. You want to place on me based on not knowing me and not even taking the chance to know me, I reject it. Like, I don't want that standard. Like, thank you. Have a nice day. CBA Drop Dead. What's up, CBA Drop Dead? What's up, Nerd Slayer and fellow detectives? I wanted to say I discovered you about 5 years ago during the pandemic times. Your videos inspired me to get into game dev. Now the prototype of my engine is up. Demo is up in a month. Congratulations, Greybell, and welcome back. Exactly. And for some people, robust, instead of overcoming that, which to me feels not just parasocial, it feels destructive and even like evil autism, is like, if you don't actually want to correct that, it just makes me, and I'm sure you can see where I'm coming from, be like, huh, why? When I meet people and I have the wrong impression about them, I try to correct it. If they've given me evidence, right? But if you have a desire to just eject yourself from that scenario or then just levy like more insults at somebody, what that means is that you basically, like what Robest said, is like you're now conflicted with that idea of whoever you think that person's supposed to be. So it's almost better for you to exit that scenario because you don't want to have to be wrong, first off, which, to be clear, to think that you would be more right than people close to somebody or the person themselves, I don't even think that's autism. I think that's just fucking retarded. Like non-clinical retardation. Meaning, why are you doing that? You have a choice. Because psychoanalyzing somebody, and to be clear, talk to any professional about this. I've spoken to many therapists. I've had therapy. Trying to psychoanalyze somebody without any information, they actually see it not only as malpractice, but as delusional. They think that that's what delusional people usually do. They self-diagnose or they diagnose other people. That's delusional, right? If you don't actually know what you're talking about, don't have any expertise, don't have any requisite knowledge, or haven't spoken to any professionals, you're just delusional about it. Like, and that's the key, is that you don't ever want to be delusional. that means that you've learned the truth or ignored the truth at some point, and you're just going la 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 la. I don't care. Like, you don't want that to be your mentality. So for my friend Jeff, that I was responding to his post there, and the reason why I responded to him, for example, on that post in a mocking way, is that to imply that a corporation, which by designation must seek profit, would not make moves that they didn't think were profit seeking is delusional. And you should learn how corporations work. So there, I use it as an example. Yeah, well, it's weirder to me, Madness, because like people then think that when they meet me, somehow the detective personality of me has like dissipated. It's like what I love to respond to people like that with is usually just like, show me right now one popular detective, fictional or not, who's ever known as being the straight shooter. Like, oh shit, someone's gonna say fucking Columbo. Columbo's pretty like straight shooter, but like, you know what I'm saying. Many people here are fucking too young to even know who Columbo is. But point being is like, what detective character or specialty consultant has ever had the prerequisite of being nice? It's just not what we're focused on. It doesn't mean you act like an asshole in real life. There's people here in chat and people in my Discord who've met me in real life, and they will only tell you positive things. Well, besides me trolling them. But meaning, I am extremely polite in person. I am very kind to people in person around me. I always say sorry, excuse me, please, including in Spanish. Do people do it here, and do people do it in all the places that I'm from? No. But as I've mentioned many, many times before, the reason that I do it is because I'm autistic. And I had to learn the rules of how to be social. And so once I learned the rules, you goddamn right, people better fucking keep enforcing them. It's a meme on Instagram, but it's true. It's like, yeah, I make sure people keep enforcing them, especially when you don't have an excuse not to. I have issues. So you can't say sorry? I have issues. You can't say excuse me? I have issues of even being grounded in my day-to-day life and feeling in my body. But you can't say excuse me? I'm fucking almost 2 meters, and I could step on you on accident, and you think it's too crazy for you to say excuse me? Like, you know how many times I've been walking around and I have like small, normal-sized people bump into me, realize that they're the rude one, and then simultaneously realize there's nothing that they could do about it anyway, if they wanted to be further rude or not. Because you're like a small little person, get out of my way. I'm being polite because I choose to. I don't have to. I could just fucking trip kick you, Osadagari you in the street, break your knee, kneecap check you, whatever, right? I know a lot of things because of martial arts in my time growing up in the street. But I don't do any of that stuff. Because that shit's fucking crazy to just do to random people in the fucking street. I'm a normal person. I'm a nerd. But yeah, I do expect people to follow social rules. So like, now you heard my in-person interaction. So would I ever start trolling with a random person in person? Or like, in real life, sorry? Probably not. I would only troll people I knew. Because I think that that's called being polite, right? But the difference is that when people pretend to act like they know you, you're basically just opening yourself up to getting trolled. And if you don't see that window, there's probably something wrong with you. Because if you think that criticism works just one direction, like sociality just works in one direction, like love works in one direction, you need to go watch 500 Days of Summer and learn the hard way, okay? Yeah, robust, exactly. Like as a child, you choose to not trust that image. Or in some cases, like you encounter me from a Death of a Game video and you're like, well, or maybe even in this moment, you're like, why is he not the calm, collected, like detective guy like he is right now? Or why is he not like that all the time? And it's like, because no detectives like that either. Whether fiction or not. No content creators like that all the time either, unless they're just that good of a fucking person. Or nice of a person. And that being said, this is one part of my personality. I love mystery. I love solving things. But do you think that if I could choose to solve something over being nice to somebody, that I would choose being nice over the solving thing? Do you see why detectives are sometimes assholes? Because we're more interested in the solving thing than the being nice. So I'm learning more of the be nice part, and I've learned more as a human being in time, right? Because I've been obsessed with mystery since I was literally a child. Um, Another reason why I chuckle when people are like, "Well, it doesn't seem very detective of you." What doesn't seem very detective of me? That I take drugs and make fun of idiots? Do you really want to die on that hill? Because there's like 6 other detectives just like that. Hey, Deity, that's fucking awesome that you actually watched my interview with Chris Avalon, because that was ages ago, and I even streamed it too. And another thing too is, as I've mentioned before in the past, Chris Avalon has treated me the most straight. Like, actually, Chris Avalon and Raph Coster, they know this already, so don't go blow them up about this. They're 2 of my fucking heroes in the video game space. They're 2 of my idols. I think they're 2 of the greatest video game developers ever. They have rep sheets to prove that. So I don't need to make the case, but they don't get talked about enough because they're not big, boisterous personalities. Um, and they're not always in the limelight, right? So you know Corey Balrog probably more than you know Chris Avalon. But in my opinion, Chris Avalon is way more noteworthy. Sorry, Corey, I think you're amazing, and I always talk about you being amazing. But Chris Avalon's made like 6 or 7 amazing franchises. Corey's known for 1. You see what I'm saying? Like, that's the level of developer we're talking about here. The same thing with Raph Koster. We're talking about somebody who made Galaxies and Ultima Online. Like, what the fuck? You know how many developers have made 2 MMOs, let alone like 2 virtual worlds that are massive? Very small amounts. You know how many of them have made 2 that are genre defining, world defining games? None. So, anyway, yeah, both of these developers are just incredible. And I've interviewed both of them now, and man, you could see it on my face, guys. Like, I still can't believe it. They follow me on Instagram or Twitter. Like, they like my posts sometimes. Like, what the fuck? What a weird world we live in, you know? Um, where you can meet your heroes and simultaneously have a great conversation with them, you know? Where you realize like they're as great as they are because they really are that great. Oh, something cool that I don't know if Chris mentioned in that interview, I'll drop now, is that Chris mentioned that he thinks that virtual worlds are by far the most complicated game. So there's another little. We already know that, but it was cool to hear Chris say that. He's like, "Oh yeah, fuck that." Like he was like, "I'm not making that shit." Like, but yeah. So another thing I want to talk about too is that these developers in question, Chris and Raph, have had personal conversations with me. In those personal conversations, they likely learned that I was a bit of a shit poster, a bit of a troll, and also a bit of a confrontationalist. What they also realized is that they weren't bothered by any of that stuff, as far as they told me and I understood, because they're smart, capable people. Why would they be threatened by someone like? I'm just asking questions, right? So when I'm just like, "Hey, Chris, why'd you do this?" Why would Chris feel threatened about that? He made the game. He can explain exactly why he made this way. Same thing for Raph. Like the defensiveness usually comes from people that don't have understanding of something, or are very emotionally involved to the point to where they can't even have a conversation about it. Meanwhile, I can tell Raph Koster, to his virtual face, "Hey, I think you fucked up at this part," and him be like, "Yeah," like we had that real interaction, like um, just like there were moments where he told me, "Actually, you're wrong. This is how it was," and he's the educator, so he gets to do that. Well, that's the thing, Madness, is I think my detective gimmick is cool. I love it. Shout out to my grandma, who, you know, has passed away a long time ago, but basically helped me like fall in love with mystery. Um, I'm gonna have lore headcanon that tells me that these people that have this perception only ever watched like Murder She Wrote. Like, and that's not true at all, but it's just like my funny headcanon is like when people say, wow, not very detective of you, or like stuff like that, or like, oh, he's crashing out. It's like, was Murder She Wrote the only detective that you watched growing up? Because that would make a lot of sense. She was a pacifist who was anti-confrontation, who would have to get saved a lot of the time in the plot. So like, maybe that's what your view of a detective is. Oh no, I found out who the killer is, but he's gonna kill me. Like, that would be literally the plot. But it's like, well, what about the other detectives? Let's just do this for the fucking lols, okay? For the lols. Okay, so let's go with Columbo first.
Did you see a blind man on the highway that day?
Of course not.
Look how smart Columbo is, bro. He's such a goat, man. Yeah, we're turning this into a mystery stream. Fuck everything else.
You think he was blind, sir?
Look at him. Eye twitching. Goes cross-eyed.
Did you see a blind man
On purpose.
on the highway that day?
Of course not. You and I both know I was miles away from here when Carl died. But I do have a little medical training. You can tell by looking at him. Cast in his eyes.
He just did weird shit with his eyes, and he just did a callback saying, hey, I just really realized that there's something wrong with you too, but he's trolling it.
He moves. But don't take my word for it. Read a few pages of this, will you, Mr. Morris? Just start anywhere, would you please?
Always pack a bulky sweater and some heavy underwear. Even in the spring, the mountains can get pretty cold at night.
Read that.
Surely it is the most beautiful of all sports.
He's blind. He's blind.
Mr. Morris?
So basically, he's allowing the exposition of the case to come to a conclusion in front of everybody. So he doesn't have to do what I do and comb through the timeline for everybody, or do it like in front of everybody. What he's doing is he's bringing the case together, and he's showing it in a scene. And Columbo did stuff like this all the time because he was very like measured. He didn't do big leaps. He would just ask you simple questions, and eventually you would make mistakes. So like, that's kind of how he interacted. He seems almost like he's apathetic, but it's not apathy. It's a game he's playing to trick people.
We push the play button. And we attach the wires here and here, where I showed you those scratches, sir.
Preposterous nonsense.
Now the killer knows when the record will end.
Yes, you demonstrated all that.
And when the arm comes over, it will make contact. First here, exploding one squib, and then here, exploding the second.
But the body fell between the two shots.
Yes, sir. That's where the killer has to take a very big chance.
You see what he's doing? He's getting him to help him build the case, but he's doing it in what's called compliance. So he's doing it because he has the guy's permission.
The dictionary has a line here dividing it in half so that it can be balanced on the edge. You see, sir? Like this.
Clever, but too unpredictable.
Important for the illusion, sir.
Sound of the body falling.
You've got it.
But impossible to time.
But this killer is very smart,
He has
sir.
the
Can he make the
craziest
book
eyes
fall
ever.
between
I
the
think
two
it's because
shots?
he has a lazy eye, by the way,
How?
guys.
Triggered by what?
I'll show you.
He would have to be a genius.
I think so
Yeah,
too,
he has a
sir.
lazy eye.
Now, I don't mean to imply that I thought of this all by myself. I mean, some of the smartest people in the world are right here in this club, and they help me, sir. They help me a lot.
Dunces, the lot of them.
Mr. Danziger, the president of the club, you wouldn't call him a dunce.
Oh, wouldn't I?
Well, it was his idea, the book, the vibrations.
Vibrations? What are you talking about?
The first squib, sir. He really made it sound very simple. When the squib goes off, it produces vibrations, and that knocks the book down.
Okay, I'll explain what's going on. He's pretending that he's solved the case and he's a genius. Like, I solved it. I know the case. And he's saying it wrong on purpose. So the guy gets so autistically, like, triggered that he has to correct him. All right. Any other, if you have suggestions in chat for detectives to watch, let's watch them. Let me watch Sherlock Black and White. Because this is the best Sherlock in my opinion. No, that's just the other one in black and white. Thanks for that. I had to skip ahead, guys, to get you something juicy.
You lose a holiday now this. I don't like your going off alone, Holmes. I don't like it at all.
Come now, Watson. Whatever we must do in a good cause must be done. Look here. Ravinia isn't very far from the Mediterranean, and it has some excellent fishing. Why don't you take a boat? I'll meet you there. We'll have our holiday after all.
Come to think of it, there's a boat sailing for the Mediterranean tomorrow, the Friesland, Swedish Africa line, cargo and passenger. I have some influence with the director.
Oh, that's very kind of you, sir. It's not just that I mind giving up our fishing, Holmes. You know that. But hang it all, I want to be of some use.
And you can be, definitely.
I can be.
Would you excuse us, sir? Look at it. Watson, I don't like this convenient accident. Too many people seem to be in on this secret. When our antagonists discover we've separated, it's more than likely you'll be followed.
So, let's talk about the level of arrogant that he's just displayed. He stops their interaction, pulls them aside, and then immediately tells them he already knows that something's off. And he refers to the guy that he thinks is the bad guy as the antagonist. Which is like super on the nose, being like, well, this is the bad guy. Like, that's not how you would talk to anybody else except his sidekick, obviously, who knows his personality and knows that's how he describes people.
So I want you to make yourself as conspicuous as possible.
Decoy, eh? Sort of sitting duck.
That's right. Oh, hello. Be on your guard constantly. Be wary of strangers, and whatever you do, don't breathe a word regarding my whereabouts.
Don't you worry, Holmes. You can trust me.
I know I can. So long, old fellow.
We must hurry, Mr. Holmes.
I'm trying to find the final collection.
Why would they have constructed it so large if it were not to accommodate 3 bottles?
Watson, have you met Mr. Kingston and Mr. Jodrey?
I've seen them about.
Mr. Kingston and Mr. Jodrey are archaeologists. They're going to Egypt to excavate a tomb.
And we've just received a wireless that the British government, Egyptian government, has granted its permission.
Oh, congratulations. Archaeologists. They might have been dug up themselves.
Watson, please.
Sorry?
Was that you singing, Ducky? I could hear you in the galley. Capital. Really it was. What was it?
Well, it was,
Oh, it doesn't matter. Well, is everybody ready? The festive board awaits.
Good God.
See, this is the most balanced Sherlock Holmes, and it's difficult for me to find scenes of him because this is the older one. However, he has tons of scenes where he basically just demonstrates that.
Ashes. That proves it. It was Abigail, unquestionably.
He thinks he's Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, it's like a little like. But you kind of hear like he's a little bit arrogant. He already knows the answers. That's always how he approaches things. There's always a slight little level of arrogance with like detective characters because they already know the answer, right?
You see now, I'm here to tell you. This remaining silent shit ain't nothing like they make it out to be. You up in here all tight with it, waiting for your pay lawyer, thinking you all wise, ain't you? No, see? That work when you some kind of criminal mastermind. When you ain't been seen running from the deed. When your own fucking running partner ain't in the next room putting you in. Oh, yeah. Yeah. He's telling it like a little bitch. We even went to Mickey D's for him because he was so motherfucking helpful.
They did this as an RDC skit, by the way. It's one of my favorite skits.
McDonald Land cookies, Dr. Pepper. That's how your boy rolled, right?
All right, step out.
Great suggestion, MMORPG guy.
Break room. So you can enjoy that, huh?
All right, but I still ain't saying shit to y'all.
Yeah.
Why not? What the fuck?
He kept the door open on purpose so you could see him. Bruh, come on.
How many years you figure we've been doing the same shit?
20 at least.
Yeah.
Offhand, I can deduce very little. Only that the words are written with a broad, pointed quill pen, which is spattered twice. That the paper is of native Mongolian manufacture, no watermark, and has been gummed, if I'm not very much in error.
That's me whenever I start playing a
who's been
video
drinking Rodent's Delight, a cheap brandy sold only in the seediest pubs.
Amazing.
Oh,
They even made him look
we
like
still
Watson.
don't know where it came from. Perhaps a closer inspection will tell us something. Coal dust. Clearly of the type used in sewer lamps.
But Basil,
Don't speak.
Ah, that's what this one is.
Yes, it's all coming back now. Ah, yes, I remember. Well, that felt good. Well, now, I expect you're all wondering why I asked you here. It's obvious that the night that wore that suit did not last very long.
Yeah, and for people wondering,
as I was saying,
the idea here is that either he's doing it on purpose or he isn't, but he's so fortuitous that he's essentially creating such a disarmed environment.
You were saying you supposed we were all wondering why you called us.
Look, there is no need for you to speak unless I ask you a question. What is your name?
I'm Shawk, the gardener.
And what is it you do?
I'm the gardener.
And why didn't you say that to me in the first place?
I did.
Look, don't try to be funny with me, monsieur. This is a very serious matter, and everyone in this room is under the suspicions.
Room?
What? What was that?
You said room.
Yes, I know that. And there is a very good chance that someone in this room knows more about the murder than he is telling.
Murder?
What was that you said?
I said murder.
What murder?
Well, I don't know. You said murder.
I said murder. You said murder.
No, I said murder because you said murder.
I said murder.
You said there was someone in this room who knew more about the murder than he's telling.
Now listen. What was your name?
Shawk.
The cook.
gardener.
Ah! Now we are getting somewhere. You!
For people who haven't seen the movie, sorry, I didn't explain that. The Pink Panther's a comedy, but it's like organized in a way where it's like semi-serious, which helps. That's kind of how old comedy worked a lot, like Monty Python, where it maintains like the idea of like it being serious the whole time, but it obviously is
All right,
funny.
Mr. Stutterstuff.
Who is this man?
He's Mr. Stutterstuff.
I see. And what is your job, Mr. Stuckerstuff?
He's the beekeeper.
I'm not asking you. I'm asking Mr. Stuffsucker. What's that? What is he saying to you? What was that?
He says he's got a bit of a cold and he's lost his voice.
Lost his voice. A beekeeper who has lost his voice. A cook who thinks he's a gardener. And a witness to a murder. Oh, yes. It is obvious to my trained eye that there is much more going on here than meets the ear.
Isn't that the part where he hits that thing?
Before you are dismissed, Mr. Stiff Sticker, I suggest you count your bees. You may find that one of them is missing.
You ruined that piano.
What is the price of one piano compared to the terrible crime that has been committed here?
Price
I
of a
like how you
Steinway.
Not anymore.
justifies it.
What is your name?
Mrs. Lever, Lily.
Mrs. Loveliver, I would take a shrewd guess
got
that you are
another
the
one,
housekeeper, am I right?
I have been with Professor Fassbender for 30 years.
That would account for your exaggerated hysteria over a simple blemish on the furniture.
Blemish?
Whatever has happened to the piano can easily be repaired. What has happened to Professor Fassbender and his daughter is another matter. That my hand.
Rorschach's Journal, October 12th, 1985. Dog carcass in alley this morning. Tire tread on burst stomach. This city's afraid of me. I've seen its true face. The streets are extended gutters, and the gutters are full of blood. And when the drains finally scab over, all the vermin will drown. The accumulated filth of all their sex and murder will foam up around their waists. And all the whores and politicians will look up and shout, "Save us." And I'll whisper, "No." Now the whole world stands on the brink, staring down into bloody hell. All those liberals and intellectuals and smooth talkers. And all of a sudden, nobody can think of anything to say. Beneath me, this awful city, it screams like an abattoir full of retarded children.
I don't know. He seems like a super nice guy to me. That's somebody. I hate how little good clips exist for fucking Detective Conan, man.
Well, thank you for your kind assistance yet again, Mr. Kudo.
कोई बात नहीं, अगर कोई और टॉप केस मिलता है
What the?
He is dead. My son, murdered. No, Harley is wrong. That's not how it happened.
Kudo!
Jimmy?
Come on, there's better ones after that. I mean, technically, Gogoro's a detective. Or at least he used to be.
何がわかる貴様に何がわからねえな。どんな理由があろうと、殺人者の気持ちなんて。
So this is actually a really good example. Both Gogoro and Conan and Detective Conan, the longest running anime, and I think it's the longest running anime period, and the longest, most successful, most popular detective show like ever, is they're very self-righteous, which is not very common in detective, which is probably why the writer did it. But Kogoro is very like honor-bound, protect people, and Conan's more about like doing the right thing because you should just do the right thing. So what he says here, if you can't read it, is the guy attacks him and tries to justify why he murdered someone. And it says, shut up, you just can't understand it.
何がわかる貴様に何がわからねえな。
He admits, I can't.
どんな理由
Judo
があろ
throws him, and as he judo throws him, he says, no matter what, I could never understand what drives people to kill.
うと、殺人者の気持ちなんて。バカ。
And he says, you think you accomplished something, it skips that part, but then he says, stupid, baka. All that happened is that you just got weaker. So like, that's why I always laugh whenever I'm watching Detective Conan, which I'm still watching at this point. And I also see those perceptions about detectives. It's like, I mean, Conan's a pretty nice guy, but he's an asshole if you're a bad guy. So really, none of the detectives are ever really being seen as being self-righteous and completely nice the entire time. Yeah. Besides this one, I'm telling you guys, this is my new theory.
You're welcome.
Because they always show the
was found murdered this morning.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
On top of that, people from Amalgamated have been crawling all...
To be clear, I'm joking about this meme, but I actually loved watching this as a kid. I grew up watching Murder, She Wrote with my grandma, so it's funny to think, like, when I think of people in the comment section getting mad at me, this is who I think of them expecting me to be.
All over the building, taking notes, really checking the joint out.
Well, what are they doing here?
Tell me, there have been ugly rumors.
Hello, Tina.
Well, Mr. McGuire, I've been waiting for you.
Appointment with the brass. Maybe lunch later, huh?
Yes, I did. Hello, Gloria.
Hello, Mrs. Fletcher.
This is Meredith Peckham. We're here for Mr. Larkin.
Okay, it'll be just a few minutes, Mrs. Fletcher.
Thank you. Yes, better be safe.
Mrs. Fletcher? What brings you here?
Well, hello. This
You
is
get the
Shireen.
idea. The thing with her is that she solves a lot of cases because she's a good writer. So she knows a lot of like things, which is actually ironically what Kudo Shinichi, aka Conan's father, is as well. He's a writer. But anyway. But how she's able to solve things most of the time is a combination of her deduction ability, but also that she's very likable. So she can often befriend the murderer, like, and get them to confess or learn something about them and use that with her other friends. She always evokes the police and other people more capable because she never tries to actually save the case herself. So I literally like being serious for a second. This is the archetype that makes sense if you think that somebody's going to like be this never rattled, always clear and collected, nice person. But I think the reality is most humans, let alone people who fancy themselves a detective, whether for video games or not, probably don't consider themselves like Murder, She Wrote. And I like this show, but I forgot how nice she was. She's so nice. That's why it's funny at times, like whenever the person has to fucking kill her, they'll be like, hey, just so you know, like, I gotta kill you. And she's like, no. It's always like a funny little reveal because the person's like, I'm evil. She's like, no. Versus like any other detective show, they either have a sidekick or they're able to deal with things themselves. Like Conan, my only complaint with him as a detective and the show in general is that they basically combined Watson with Sherlock, put him in a kid's body, and taught him Japanese. And I feel like that's kind of OP. He's not actually a fighter in the show. He does get saved by other fighters more. But lately, especially in the movies, like, Conan's been doing a lot more action scenes. And I think that's just to satisfy most fans. They prefer action. But normally Conan isn't like the action-bound one. Bogoro knows judo. Ranechan knows karate. Sarah knows boxing. Or no, Jeet Kune Do. Forgot the other guy's name that knows boxing. But there's a couple characters that like they all know martial arts, so like Conan doesn't actually have to like fight that much. He usually will use like a gadget and then kind of like get his way out of something. Top 10 anime plot twists, yeah. Basically, just teach a kid Sherlock Holmes, teach him Japanese, and you'll have Conan. No, I'm just kidding. But alright, y'all, I'm trolling around enough. But I will talk to y'all later. It's been a nice stream. Cool to see everybody again. Have a good rest of your week. Peace.